Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to the Mark Fraley podcast. Today is March 26, 2021. It is a clear, sunny, and cool Friday morning here in Nashville. As always, thank you to Ron Trammell and the Cats Tribute Band for our intro music. Lots of signs of spring around the garden today, with daffodils blooming and redbuds beginning to show out. We had some severe storms last night in Middle Tennessee, including some large hail and strong straight-line winds. There are reports of downed trees and power outages around town. These storms serve as kind of an eerie reminder of the extensive damage that was done by last year's tornadoes in Nashville. Fortunately, we have many groups here in Nashville who are working diligently to replace trees lost in last year's storm, and to build back better, as it were. Urban forestry has become a reoccurring subject of our podcasts, and it seems like every week a new not-for-profit organization emerges with the goal of restoring the tree canopy in our urban areas. And while it may seem that these organizations and their efforts are duplicative, they are not. There is just that much that needs to be done. The Tennessee Urban Forestry Council is by no means a new organization, having been around since the early 1990s. Yesterday, I had a conversation with Ashley Kite-Rowland, who works for the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council as the Urban and Community Forestry Partnership Coordinator. If you are a civic leader in any Tennessee city or town, and you share a belief that trees contribute to the environmental health of the community, then you need to get to know Ashley. She works on a statewide basis, connecting organizations with resources and support, all aimed at improving the forest canopy of our urban areas. Ashley comes to her work with a diverse background, a holistic approach, and an energetic spirit. And so I hope you'll enjoy my interview with Ashley Kite-Rowland. Ashley Kite-Rowland, welcome to the Mark Fraley podcast.
Oh, it's so good to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Ashley, I've been looking forward to meeting you. You and I have never met personally, but over the last several months, I've been monitoring the Facebook feed of the Urban Forestry Council, and almost every day something interesting or unique comes through that feed, and I decided, well, let's find out who's behind all that, and let's have a chat. So really, I've been looking forward to talking with you more.
Well, thank you so much, and I learn a lot, and that's why I post it on the Facebook feed, as I come across so many interesting articles, and I just think, oh wow, I think this is so cool. So
well, I encourage
share it with all of you.
People that do Facebook. To check out that and like it and subscribe to that feed, because there'll be interesting things coming through, repeatedly over and over again. Ashley, it's sort of traditional in this program or on this program. And of course, we talk with people in the conservation field and parks and recreation and related fields to ask about themselves personally and how you got into this field, and what was your motivation or inspiration to become a forester and someone interested in natural resources management?
That's an interesting question, because my route has not been very straight. So I guess I would start with the fact that I grew up in East Tennessee, in the beautiful hills of East Tennessee, and from a very young age, I always played outside. I loved working in the garden with my grandparents. I was introduced to growing food very early on. Really, all of my childhood memories were spent outside, camping, climbing trees. My summer memories are filled with the sound of cicadas and crickets. So I was always very close to the outdoors. We only had one TV in the house, and so I never wanted to watch what my parents were watching. So I spent most of my time outside. So I think that where I am now started then. My grandmother would walk me around the yard and tell me the names of the plants and the trees, and if she had planted them or who she had got them from, because, you know, sharing your plants is, I mean, that's a really important thing to do, and it helps build relationships and communities. So she would tell me who the plants came from and their names. And I really think that that just impressed upon me who I am today. But I grew up and I liked hiking and that kind of thing. But then I went to high school, played sports, got into all of those things that teenagers do. And I feel like, although I still really enjoyed to spend time outdoors, I got away from that and I wasn't spending as much time with my grandparents. So I went to college, and I started out with a major in biology, and I loved biology, but really what I can see now is I loved ecology. So I got in some classes that I really wasn't that into. And at UT Knoxville, I got the opportunity to take an anthropology class. And when I took anthropology, I was like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I want to do, because it was so fascinating. I had never been exposed to anything like that before in high school. And so I majored in anthropology, started out in forensics, and then I switched to cultural anthropology because it was so fascinating. And I transferred to Middle Tennessee State University.
Not to interrupt. Well, I will interrupt you just a second. Now,
Yeah.
the forensic anthropology program at UT is notorious. Noteworthy is probably a better word to use. Dr. Bass is the world-renowned anthropology guy in forensics. My goodness.
Yes. Well, and he was gone before I was there, but
Okay.
he had people there that were still in place. It's still to this day a really fabulous, like, leading program
Right.
in forensics. And so I started out interested in biological anthropology, but part of majoring in anthropology is you had to do all types of classes. So you had to do archaeology, biological anthropology, and then cultural anthropology. And Dr. Logan taught the course at UT Knoxville. And I was just so fascinated. And, I think it may have been that I was a girl from Tennessee. I'm learning about all these cultures around the world that I had never been exposed to before. So I was just so fascinated, and it really piqued my curiosity. And my approach to learning is you should major in and learn the things that are really just fascinating and make you just want to learn more. And so that's what I did. And when I transferred to MTSU, they had some really fabulous cultural anthropology professors. I focused on Asian studies. I had the opportunity to study abroad in Thailand and Burma, where I focused
My
on
goodness.
Buddhism. And that was really cool. And, so that all happened. And then I graduated. And what did I do with my degree? I was a social worker.
Oh my.
And I started out in women's health, and I stayed there for quite some time. And anthropology really helped me do that, because anthropology is all about the study of humans. And so I felt like it really helped me approach relationships with an open mind. It really allowed me to think critically about the systems that I was working within. And I was a victims advocate in domestic violence and sexual assault. And I did that
In East Tennessee?
in Knoxville.
Okay.
And
Goodness.
But do you know what got me through like all of that? Like, because it was really stressful. I reconnected with nature, just like I had when I was younger. So during those really stressful moments of work where I knew I was making a difference, afterwards I would always go into the woods and walk. I was really fortunate to live in the urban wilderness corridor in Knoxville. So I feel like that kept me balanced. And it really put me on the road to where I am now. My daughter went to a nature preschool there at there was a Montessori school at IAMS Nature Center, and we just spent a lot of time there. Then we moved to Martin, Tennessee, where I live now. My partner is a professor of sociology here at the university, and he had studied environmental sociology too. That's how we met. He was a sociologist and I was an anthropologist at MTSU. So we'd always been really interested in the environment and environmental justice issues. And when we moved here, I had been really involved in, or a really big advocate for local food in Knoxville. And so I thought, hey, I'm moving to an agricultural area. It's going to be great. There's going to be a lot of small farmers. And we moved here, and I wasn't being a social worker anymore. And I realized there were tons of farmers here, but it was really hard to find the small farmers where I could get meat and things that I wanted for my family, because there's a lot of big ag here, lots of soybeans, cotton, corn, wheat, all of things that are important for our food supply. But they're also small farmers. But here, the way you get access to local meat, it was all about who you knew. And I didn't know those people. So I met another person who was a transplant here they had moved from New York, but she had lived around the country in the Peace Corps. And we met and we started the local food network. And how it started was that we were two moms with young children who had professors as husbands who wanted local food. We wanted access to local meat. So we just developed a guide of local farmers. So for people that could move into the area, we could say, hey, here's where you get local food and you can support these small farmers.
Great idea.
Yeah, it was awesome. So we started there, and then it just developed into a nonprofit where we were promoting the farmers market. Right now, the local food guide is for 9 counties in the Northwest Tennessee area. It started in Weakley County where we live, and it is an official nonprofit now. We've gotten USDA farm to school grants, things like that.
Got it.
Well, and then I decided that I wanted to go back to graduate school, and I got my master's degree. And my focus there was on the importance of children's access to the natural world. And I really feel like that goes all the way back, like coming full circle back. So I started the local food guide and everything with my friend. But that connection went back to my grandparents and growing food in the garden when I was a young child. So my master's degree, I was focused on the importance of children's access to the natural world for their development, health and well-being, things like that. My daughter had the opportunity to go to a nature preschool in Knoxville. Well, when we moved here, I had another daughter, and when we were trying to find childcare for her, we didn't have access to anything like that.
Right.
And the university daycare was great, and it had a great outdoor environment. And the outdoor environment is what was really important to me. They had trees, they had places that she could experience plants and wood and things like that. But not all childcare centers had that. So my research was on the importance of nature to children's development, but the specific focus was on the amount of nature that Tennessee childcare centers have in their outdoor spaces, because children spend
or don't
a lot
have.
of a lot of children spend much of their life there. Right. And what I found, you're right, that was a very appropriate comment, is that there isn't a lot of nature and trees in these spaces. And that is something that is easily remedied. And that is something that I'm still wanting to work toward. But during that time, so I'm working on my thesis, and I wanted my yard to be a tree sanctuary, which I can tell you about in a little bit. So I saw that the TUFC was accepting new board members. The TUFC is the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council. And I applied to be a board member, and they accepted me, which I was so thankful and honored for. And that's how I got involved with the Urban Forestry Council. And that was about 2 years ago. And so that was a really circuitous route to tell you how
Ashley,
I got where I am today.
I've known you for 15 minutes, and I already know why they picked you to be on the board. They said, okay, we got some fresh talent here, somebody with unbridled enthusiasm, and let's go.
Well, I am really enthusiastic about the Urban Forestry Council, and really just all the things that I just told you about. I mean, whether it's local food or connecting children to the natural world, or me just walking around my own yard looking at the weeds or the beautiful spring flowers, as I like to think of them, it really does elicit a sense of joy in me. Like I am enthusiastic about making other people aware of this beauty that surrounds them, but also hoping to like facilitate like their own enthusiasm about being able to have these experiences.
That's just fantastic. Let me step back just a minute and be just a little bit bureaucratic about relationships and organizations and how all these things work together. It's been a number of years ago, actually 4 years ago, I interviewed the fellow who was the state forester for urban forestry over at the Ellington Ag Center, and I understand that that position is no longer there, but that the Division of Forestry has made an arrangement with the Urban Forestry Council to kind of manage that activity for them, or to occupy that space on behalf of the Forestry Division. Have I gotten that right, or what's that? What is that relationship?
Well, the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council is very closely partnered with the Tennessee Division of Forestry. So you're absolutely accurate about that. And you're also, it is true that they no longer have a state urban forester. What they have right now is, so they still are very much committed to urban and community forestry. So they have, actually, let me back up. So with the reason we have urban and community forestry is because it's important, but also there's a federal mandate that if you receive certain funds for urban and community forestry, you have certain things that you have to do.
The state has to do to get those
funds.
To
get the funds, right. And so there are two positions that are required to get those funds. The first one is having an urban and community forestry program coordinator. And the second one is having an urban and community forestry partnership coordinator. That can be more than one person, but you have to have people filling those partnership roles. So they no longer have an urban forester directly in the Tennessee Division of Forestry. However, they do have a program coordinator of urban and community forestry still, and it is Diane Warwick, and she is in Knoxville. Okay. And but how they work with the TUFC, and we are so thankful to work with them in this capacity, because the having an urban forestry council is also one of the requirements of those federal dollars. So you have to have the partnership and program coordinator, but then you also have to have an urban forestry council that helps steer the direction that you're going in your state. So the Urban Forestry Council is part of, I think it's like that trifecta that we're going to go out and reach the state. So the partnership comes in that the Division of Forestry partners with us so that we fulfill the Tennessee Urban and Community Forestry Partnership Coordinator position. And that is my role right now. So I work really closely with Diane to make sure that we are carrying out all the requirements in all 95 counties of the state. And, all 95 counties in this state are very different. You have urban areas, you have rural areas, you have places that have really active tree boards and tree organizations that are getting things done. You have other areas that really want to do that, but don't know where to start. So it is our job to make sure that all these communities get the resources they need to build their tree canopy, which is super important for a whole host of reasons. Does that answer your question about that relationship?
Yes, it does. But go on and tell us about what your priorities are in terms of your activities.
Okay. And then, yes, so my office is there at the Tennessee Division of Forestry, but I cover the whole state. And part of my duties are for that partnership coordinator position with the Tennessee Division of Forestry, and aligning with those federal funds and those activities that we need to do to fulfill those requirements. But that's only part of what I do. The other part is we have an organization, the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council. We have our own mission, we have our own programming, we have membership. So I'm also charged with coordinating those activities. So I have both. They're very much aligned, but they're different. Different parts of carrying out the same function. So with the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council, our mission is to inspire and empower people. So it's to inspire and empower people to develop and sustain healthy urban and community forests. I'm not sure if I got that right verbatim, but the idea is that.
Yeah.
And the reason the inspire and empower is so important is that we recognize there are tree organizations all over the state doing fabulous work putting trees in the ground. That's not our mission. Our mission is to inspire and empower citizens and those organizations to do that good work. We will join them in the tree plantings, but we're not out organizing the tree plantings. We are a true council in that we want to bring all those organizations and the citizens interested in trees and the governments and everyone together so that we can make sure that those things happen and give people the tools to make it happen. Does that make sense? How that differentiates us? So we're differentiated in that way from Root Nashville or the Nashville Tree Conservation Corps. Trees Knoxville does a lot of tree planting. We want to be at another level where we are bringing in information from outside of the state and getting that out to people. We want to be a connector of organizations throughout the state so that they can learn from one another. Because when I hear an idea that's happening in Memphis and I'm in Knoxville, I would be like, oh man, that's really cool. We can totally make that happen here. So when we share ideas and share resources, it catalyzes action to happen more quickly. So that's what we are wanting to do, is to forge those connections so that we see growth and change happen more quickly by bringing all these good folks and organizations together. Is that clear? Kind of on the organization?
Very well done. You know, it's March here in Tennessee, and just watching the news and the activities that are going on, there are a lot of trees being planted in Tennessee in the last 2 weeks and in the 2 weeks to come, I think. The Environmental Council, as you mentioned, the Conservation Corps, numerous organizations are out there on the landscape planting trees.
Yes, well, March is Arbor Day in Tennessee. Right. Arbor Day is at the beginning of March. We are at the very end of our tree planting season here in Tennessee. Right. People start planting, in November. Some of our towns celebrate Arbor Day during that time of year, and but people are planting trees up until now. Tennessee Tree Day was last Saturday, where they were planting trees all over the state. We were really happy to participate in that. The Tennessee Urban Forestry Council, we weren't planting those trees, but lots of our board members were participating in pickup sites. I served as a distribution center here in Northwest Tennessee. So we were really glad to be involved in those efforts to get native Tennessee grown trees planted all over the state. And the Division of Forestry is involved in that with the Tennessee Environmental Council, because they grow most of the trees here in Tennessee that are then planted. So it truly is a homegrown state effort that is really fabulous. So I'm glad to participate in that every year.
Forestry Division has, I guess, their major nurseries down in Ocoee, Tennessee, down near the Ocoee River.
Yes. I always say it wrong. I think it's Delano.
That's
Tennessee.
Right. That's right.
Sometimes I say Delano, but it's Delano. Right. I'm pretty certain.
Now, they used to have a nursery at Pinson Mounds, and I don't know whether they still utilize that or I remember when the site down in southeast Tennessee was acquired. It's a river bottom area along the Hiwassee River, and they thought that it was a better place to grow, particularly white pine. But are they still using the Pinson nursery?
I don't think so. Not for like Tennessee Tree Day and that kind of thing. I mean, there's still large swaths of like trees, but they're older trees, like mature trees that are there. So I don't think that they're growing them for things like this.
Yeah, there were problems with the soil type there at Pinson. Well, that's kind of off the subject. Tell us a little bit about.
Really awesome though.
I'm sorry.
I said Pinson is a really awesome place to visit.
Pinson is absolutely a world-class place that people should go and see. So give us some stories about what's going on around the state.
is going on throughout the state? There has been lots of tree planting things going on. Let me think. Well, I'll tell you some stories that are just like some really cool things that are happening just this month. And then I'll tell you some other things like about our programs and what's going on with TUFC. So one really neat partnership that I have been able to be involved with, and it started in January, and it was just so kind of random and serendipitous, and it's turned into this really beautiful thing, is that in January, someone from AT&T Pioneers, so AT&T, everyone knows who AT&T is. They have a volunteer arm with their employees. It's called the AT&T Pioneers, and we have a Tennessee chapter that serves all over the state. So someone reached out by email just saying, hey, we really want to plant trees as one of our service activities this year. And like I said, this was toward the end of January. And they said, we would like to do it around Arbor Day. And we want to do it in all 3 grand divisions of the state. And we have $1,000 to give to the project, to each project. Can you help us? And I thought, oh man, this is super exciting. And my job is to be the partnership coordinator,
Right.
So I thought, I totally want to do this. And we have active groups across the state. So I'll start with Memphis. So in Memphis, we have the West Tennessee Urban Forestry Council. We have a chapter there. They're very active, and they are an incredible group of people that have established tons of arboreta throughout the Memphis area and West Tennessee, and they do lots of tree ID classes. They have an urban forestry citizen class that is there. Anyway, so the West Tennessee chapter is great. So AT&T called, they want to plant trees in Memphis, and I contacted the West chapter, and they said, oh, we know just the person you need to talk to, and it was Mary Baker with Neighborhood Preservation, Inc. And if you don't know about Neighborhood Preservation, Inc. in Memphis, it's a really cool organization, and you should look them up. But it's all about
absolutely.
They really work in the neighborhoods there, and it's really fabulous. So what Mary wanted to do is there was a community that had a lot of vacant lots, and they had 2 that had been cleared, and it was right up against the interstate. And she wanted to plant trees on these 2 abandoned lots to help green the area and to create like a park, and also to grow the tree canopy there. So she got volunteers together with the West Tennessee Urban Forestry Council, and then it was Neighborhood Preservation, Inc. and AT&T volunteers. All of them got together, and they planted trees on those 2 lots on, I think it was March 6th, at the beginning of March. And it is now going to be a certified arboretum with the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council. And you have to have 30 distinct species of trees in order to qualify to be an arboretum. So that's one really cool thing that happened recently, and that was in the Klondike community of Memphis.
Okay.
And like I said, there's tons of things going on there all the time. But the second thing that happened with AT&T, they wanted to plant in Nashville. We're like, okay, Nashville's great. And so Nathan Hoover with the Tennessee Division of Forestry connected me with Eric Keeler with Metro Nashville Water Services. And Eric had flood buyout properties. So there was the big flood in 2010. There were flood buyout properties in North Nashville, and it was off, I think, West Hamilton Drive. So he wanted us to work through Route Nashville, because Route Nashville has a goal to, I think it's 500,000 trees, but I forget when the deadline is. It's coming up, but they're doing a really good job. So Route Nashville, Metro Water Services, Tennessee Urban Forestry Council, Tennessee Division of Forestry, and AT&T came together to do a tree planting on Tennessee Tree Day, which was really awesome. And we planted 100 trees along West Hamilton Avenue in 2 hours. They were really amazing. I didn't do anything, but they dug all the holes and got all the trees
done.
planted.
Yeah,
and it was awesome. And it just showed how people can come together and make a difference. Go ahead.
To dig down into that, why is Metro Water Services involved in tree planting?
Well, I mean, trees are really important. For one, this was in a riparian area.
Right.
And riparian, all that means is it's like by the waterway. So it's in like a flood zone. So if you have a creek and there's trees beside it, that's the riparian zone. And ideally, it's going to extend out pretty far. But usually, when there are plants in this riparian area, it's very narrow. But we want it to be much larger because it helps with flooding, it helps with water
Exactly.
quality, it
Exactly.
helps filter the sediment and things that are going through. So trees, they hold the bank in place. I don't know if you've ever
Yeah,
seen.
it's part of their
Mhm.
stormwater management
Yeah,
program. And
absolutely.
when these areas that got flooded, I guess it's been 10 years or so now ago when we had that major flood through here.
Hmm.
The properties that were prone to flooding have been acquired by the city, and the houses have been demolished, and so it's property in public ownership, I presume. And so
Yeah.
so planting trees. Okay, so you were going to tell the third story, I think, about something in East Tennessee this time.
Yeah, so it's still AT&T, and it's just cool things that are going on. So part of that thing is that we were able to, Diane Warwick, who is the program coordinator for urban and community forestry in Tennessee, was able to connect with people in Johnson City. And we are going to be doing another tree planting this Saturday at Jacobs Nature Park there in Johnson City. And Jacobs Nature Park has a really cool story. And it is like what they're doing is planting all native trees so that they can have a level 2 arboretum. And they're very much focused on pollinators and just having this as like a really beautiful nature space. So every tree planting that is going on across the state in Memphis, Nashville, and then Johnson City, they were all very different, like in their purposes. So one was in a neighborhood, one was in like a riparian zone, and this other is in a nature park. But all of them are making a difference, and all of them are partners coming together to help the AT&T volunteers be able to plant trees and make a difference in these communities.
Ashley, I was intrigued some time ago, and I think you and I spoke about this on the phone when we spoke a month or so ago, about the program in some city that is involved in planting fruit trees along rights of way.
Yes, well, that's happening all over the country.
Okay, tell us about that.
So I'm really interested in agroforestry. And so when you think of forestry, you think of trees. And when you think of like local food, you're thinking of community gardens and, growing, having containers of food and things like that, or small farms. So agroforestry really brings the two together. And I recently listened to a webinar on urban agroforestry. But what it is you can grow food in forest, in tree areas. And when you're thinking of forest, throw out the idea that a forest exists out there in a national park or in a rural area. Like the forest is really all around us. If you live in an urban area, it's the tree canopy. Like that is your forest. It may be very sparse, but that's why we need to grow it larger. And so it's not just trees. A forest is a whole ecosystem. So in like food forest, you can grow nut trees, you can grow fruiting trees, you can also grow mushrooms, and you can have things along the ground like vines that are producing food. So it's all about utilizing this space to do more than just have the benefits of trees, because trees have tons of benefits and they're feeding insects and pollinators, all the time. I mean, hopefully, if you have the right tree that's a native tree. But why not grow trees that also have the capacity to feed humans? And that's really what agroforestry is all about. And so a lot of cities are planting, well, I'll tell you about this one nonprofit that is really cool called the Giving Grove. And the Giving Grove establishes public orchards. They will partner with organizations and do public orchards in cities. And actually, this is going on in Memphis right now through Memphis Tilt. So Tennessee is really fortunate to be part of that organization. So you establish these public orchards, and then what my understanding is then the fruits are donated to the community and local food pantries.
Just a fantastic idea. Now,
Yeah.
several times this afternoon, as we've spoken, you've mentioned native species and native trees. Is this an emphasis of yours personally, or is this an emphasis of your organization? Or tell us about why.
Why? Well, trees that are native, I mean, are beneficial not only to the local ecosystem, but to the insects and other animals and things that live here. They're things that they're used to eating. And when you bring in an invasive species, trees, they produce seeds and they spread, and privet and things like that spread. And when they spread, they are competing with those native plants. And the invasive species oftentimes do not have, what's it called? I just lost my thing. They don't have
any kind of natural enemies.
Yes.
Yes.
I was thinking predators. I was like, it's not right. Predators. Like, no. What is that? They don't have that. And so they are growing and producing more, and they're out competing their native companions. So the reason native is important is for the health of the ecosystem, really. And what was your other question? So why are natives important? And then, is it for me or for the organization? Well, I'm personally really interested in native plants, but also for our organization. So we do certify arboreta across the state, and we are working toward not including invasive species within our arboreta in like counting toward the tree count, because they are very detrimental to the health of ecosystems and environments. Like before I did the tree planting in Nashville this weekend, we had a weed wrangle at Ellington Ag Center. And it was our first one, and it's part of the Restore Ellington project. And the state forester was there, David Arnold, who's just a fabulous person. And he was talking about why it's so important to get the invasive species out of the forest, because like bush honeysuckle and things like that, we were in a mature oak area. So when these invasive species are spreading, it creates shade, and it makes it so that the natural or the native species that are there cannot regenerate naturally. And so then it changes the whole composition of the area into something that it should not be and was never meant to be, because these species were introduced here by humans. So yeah, it's an organizational thing.
And so when you start looking at wildlife and how it's supported by the forest ecosystem, if you the native birds are going to be reliant upon native trees and the things that native trees produce, not just the fruits, but the bugs on the trees and all that sort of thing. So, are there invasive trees that have become a significant problem in Tennessee than others?
Yeah, and a tree of heaven is a problem. Bradford Pears. So, I mean, it's such a timely thing to talk about, because right now, everywhere you go, it seems like you can smell a Bradford pear and see it too. So yeah, those are a really big problem. And if you, as you're driving along, you can see on the sides of like woodlands, you can see Bradford pears that are coming up. And you can see they're invasive, but people plant them all over, like in developments, they're always planting Bradford pears. But there are numerous trees that can be substituted really beautifully. Like right now, I have a wild plum that is a blooming white, just like the Bradford pear, and it's so beautiful. And it's great for erosion control. It forms thickets, and it's just a lovely tree. It produces fruit too. We can use those instead of using Bradford pears, but big box stores and nurseries, they sell them, and not everyone is aware that just because a tree is pretty doesn't mean that it's the best thing for an environment. So I think Bradford pears are a problem, tree of heaven is a problem, but then you get into bush honeysuckle and privet. I mean, privet, it's not, these things do provide food for birds. Birds love privet. It's like junk food, just like we enjoy foods that aren't necessarily good for us. Well, birds really enjoy privet berries, and it's not good for the ecosystem, but they're not thinking about that. They're not thinking that this privet is going to crowd out other things that are really good for me too. So even if they do provide some food, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for the overall health.
I got it.
Of the ecosystem.
So Ashley, we're getting short on time here. We've gone close to 50 minutes at this point. The time goes quickly.
It does.
Tell the listeners exactly how they can get in touch with you, your organization, and tap into what you're doing.
Well, I mean, you can look on our website. So we have been trying to update the website and look at what programs we're doing. The ones that we run, we have our Arboretum certification program that's going on throughout the state. We have a tree sanctuary program where people can certify their yard. So if you have 10 distinct species of trees within your yard, you can be a certified tree sanctuary. We ask that you properly care for them. And so there's certain criteria to meet. But there, I mean, again, we're talking about tree diversity. We want to encourage that. And you can really have a lot of tree diversity in a small space. I have less than an acre, like way less than an acre. And I have over 20 distinct species of trees on my property. And I still have a garden and I still have some open areas. So it's not like I live in a forest, but you can have a lot of diversity. So Arboretum Tree Sanctuary Program, we also have an annual conference every October. And the goal there is to bring tree enthusiasts together throughout the state, arborists, urban foresters, tree organizations, to come together to learn new things, but also to energize one another and share ideas so that we can go back to our individual communities and really put those things into action. Because that, when we talk about inspiring and empowering as an organization, the goal of that is to get people activated to making a difference in their community. And I think sometimes people think they don't have the right education or knowledge. And what I want those people to hear is that they can still make a difference. I am not a forester. My background is in anthropology and social work. So I do not have any formal training in working in forests, but I'm very passionate about it. And you can learn and you can make a difference with trees and with tons of other things in your community. So if you have the desire to be involved, then please reach out to me. You can do that through social media on Facebook or by email or our website. You can reach me by telephone too. But that is my job, is to make sure that I connect people with places to be involved.
Absolutely.
When we all work together, we can make a huge difference.
And that's the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council website is what you're referring to, right?
Yes, it's TUFC.com.
Okay, super. Got it. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today on the Mark Fraley podcast. It's been a joy to have you and speak with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Take care.